There's a specific kind of radio silence that cuts through the cockpit when everything goes catastrophically wrong. Not the normal chatter fade during routine maneuvers, not the brief pause before landing clearance, but the bone-deep quiet that happens when 200 souls are depending on decisions you make in the next 30 seconds. That was the exact silence filling my headset when the hydraulic failure alarm screamed through the cabin of Flight 847. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The massive commercial airliner shuddered beneath my hands, its controls fighting me like a wild animal as we plummeted through 28,000 feet of open sky above the Cascade Mountains. In the passenger cabin behind me, families were gripping their armrests, flight attendants were bracing against bulkheads, and somewhere in seat 14C, a businessman was probably writing what he thought might be his final text message. All of them trusting that the woman in the captain's seat, me, had what it took to bring them home. Captain Elena Vasquez. That's what my uniform name tag read, what the air traffic controllers called me, what 15 years of military and commercial aviation training had earned me. But 6 hours earlier, at my family's Thanksgiving dinner in Millbrook, my younger sister Cassandra had looked me dead in the eye and called me something else entirely, a fake pilot playing dress-up in Daddy's fantasy. The irony wasn't lost on me as I fought to stabilize a 180-ton aircraft with failing systems and a rapidly deteriorating glide path. My sister's words echoed in my memory even as I calculated fuel burn rates, emergency landing strips, and the physics of bringing down a damaged bird carrying nearly 200 passengers. She'd said it with such conviction, such casual cruelty, like she was commenting on the weather, as if my Bronze Star from 2 combat deployments in Afghanistan meant nothing, as if my perfect safety record across 8 years of commercial flights was just luck, as if the captain's stripes on my shoulders were some kind of costume jewelry. Elena, we're showing complete hydraulic failure on all primary systems, came the voice of my co-pilot, Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, through the intercom. His tone was steady, professional, but I caught the slight tension that meant he was running through emergency protocols in his head just like I was. Backup systems are responding, but we're looking at manual controls only for landing. Manual controls. No power steering, no automated landing assistance, no margin for error. Just raw pilot skill, muscle memory, and whatever grace the aviation gods felt like granting us on a cold November afternoon over Western Oregon. The kind of landing that separates real pilots from pretenders. The kind that proves whether you belong in that captain's seat, or if you're just, as my sister had put it, fooling everyone, including yourself. I keyed my radio to respond to Morrison, but for just a split second, I heard Cassandra's voice again from earlier that day. We'd been standing in our parents' kitchen, the same kitchen where she used to accidentally delete my flight simulator saves when we were teenagers, where she'd roll her eyes whenever I talked about aviation careers, where she'd perfected the art of making my achievements feel smaller. "Come on, Elena," she said, loud enough for our cousins to hear. "We all know you're compensating for something. Real pilots don't need to prove themselves with all that military show-off stuff." The initial sting of the remark wasn't lost on me as I fought to stabilize a 180-ton aircraft with failing systems and a rapidly deteriorating glide path. Her words echoed in my memory even as I calculated fuel burn rates, emergency landing strips, and the physics of bringing down a damaged bird carrying nearly 200 passengers. She'd said it with such conviction, such casual cruelty, like she was commenting on the weather, as if my Bronze Star from 2 combat deployments in Afghanistan meant nothing, as if my perfect safety record across 8 years of commercial flights was just luck, as if the captain's stripes on my shoulders were some kind of costume jewelry. "Elena, we're showing complete hydraulic failure on all primary systems," came the voice of my co-pilot, Lieutenant Commander James Morrison. His tone was steady, professional, but I caught the slight tension that meant he was running through emergency protocols in his head, just like I was. Backup systems are responding, but we're looking at manual controls only for landing. Manual controls. No power steering, no automated landing assistance, no margin for error. Just raw pilot skill, muscle memory, and whatever grace the aviation gods felt like granting us on a cold November afternoon over Western Oregon. The kind of landing that separates real pilots from pretenders. The kind that proves whether you belong in that captain's seat or if you're just, as my sister had put it, fooling everyone, including yourself. I keyed my radio to respond to Morrison, but for just a split second, I heard Cassandra's voice again from earlier that day. We'd been standing in our parents' kitchen, the same kitchen where she used to accidentally delete my flight simulator saves when we were teenagers, where she'd roll her eyes whenever I talked about aviation careers, where she'd perfected the art of making my achievements feel smaller. "Come on, Elena," she said, loud enough for our cousins to hear. "We all know you're compensating for something. Real pilots don't need to prove themselves with all that military show-off stuff." The initial sting of the remark may have felt cutting, but in the face of this moment, this crisis, this test of everything I'd trained for, it wasn't about proving anything to Cassandra. It wasn't about family validation or sibling rivalry or who got more attention at holiday dinners. This was about the 73-year-old grandmother in seat 12A who was flying to see her newest grandchild, about the honeymooning couple in first class who'd saved for 2 years for this trip, about the unaccompanied minor in 23F who was traveling to spend Christmas with her father, about the businessmen, the teachers, the retirees, the college students, every single person who trusted Meridian Airlines, and by extension, me, to get them safely to their destination. "Elena, we're showing complete hydraulic failure on all primary systems," came the voice of my co-pilot, Lieutenant Commander James Morrison. "Backup systems are responding, but we're looking at manual controls only for landing." "Negative on Salem. Runway's too short for our current weight and approach angle." I interrupted as I scanned the terrain below. "Run Mill 34 and start running through emergency evacuation procedures. Contact Portland Tower and tell them we're coming in heavy with full manual controls. And James, start running through the emergency evacuation procedures."
As I spoke those words, calm, decisive, automatic, I realized something had shifted inside me. Not just in this moment, but over the years leading up to it. Somewhere between my sister's casual dismissals and this life-or-death crisis, I'd stopped needing her approval. I'd stopped carrying the weight of her doubt. Because real skill doesn't require family validation. Real competence doesn't need permission to exist. The mountains of Oregon stretched out below us, beautiful and dangerous, as I began the most challenging approach of my career. In 37 minutes, I would either prove every hour of training, every sacrifice, every moment of dedication had been worth it, or I wouldn't. But either way, I knew exactly who I was. Captain Elena Vasquez. Not fake, not compensating, just ready. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The thing about growing up with Cassandra Vasquez was that she made everything look effortless, while making sure you knew how hard you were trying. We were only 18 months apart, but she carried herself like she'd been born understanding secrets the rest of us were still figuring out. While I spent hours building model airplanes in our garage, studying aerodynamics textbooks I'd borrowed from the Millbrook Public Library, she'd breeze through her homework in 20 minutes and spend the rest of the evening perfecting her eyeliner or planning outfits that somehow always looked magazine-ready. Our parents, Rosa and Miguel Vasquez, immigrated from Guatemala when I was 3 and Cassandra was barely walking. They worked double shifts at the Riverside manufacturing plant, Dad on the factory floor and Mom in quality control, saving every penny they could for our education and what they called the American dream. They were the kind of parents who attended every school event, cheered at every soccer game, and never once made us feel like their sacrifices were burdens we needed to carry. But they also worked so much that they missed the subtle ways Cassandra and I were becoming different people. They saw 2 daughters who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and seemed to get along well enough. They didn't notice that Cassandra had learned to make my interests seem childish without saying so directly, or that I'd started keeping my aviation magazines hidden under my mattress because she'd accidentally used them as scrap paper for her art projects. The pattern started early. When I was 8 and obsessed with watching planes take off from Millbrook Regional Airport, Cassandra would tag along and spend the entire time pointing out how loud and polluted the jets were. When I joined the high school ROTC program, she made sure everyone knew it was because I needed structure and couldn't handle regular classes. When I got accepted to the Air Force Academy, she threw me a going-away party where she spent most of the night talking about how hard it would be for the family with me so far away. She wasn't mean, exactly. That was the insidious part. Cassandra never screamed or threw tantrums or made scenes. She just had this way of positioning herself as the reasonable, grounded sister while making me feel like the one who was always reaching for something just beyond my capabilities. She'd hug me at the airport when I left for Colorado Springs and whisper, "I'm so proud of you for trying this," with just enough emphasis on trying to plant a seed of doubt. At the academy, I thrived in ways that surprised everyone, including myself. The discipline felt natural. The academic rigor was challenging but manageable. And flight training was like coming home to a language I'd always been meant to speak. I called home every Sunday, and Cassandra would listen to my stories about formation flying, navigation exercises, and leadership courses with what sounded like genuine interest. She'd say, "That's amazing, Alina. I could never handle all that pressure. You're so much stronger than me." It took me years to realize that her compliments always came with a subtle barb attached. I wasn't strong. I was handling pressure because I couldn't function without external structure. I wasn't achieving. I was compensating. I wasn't succeeding. I was trying so hard that everyone felt obligated to encourage me. Meanwhile, Cassandra glided through her communications degree at State University, landed an entry-level position at a prestigious marketing firm in Portland, and seemed to collect boyfriends, promotions, and social media followers without breaking a sweat. She'd post photos from company retreats and wine country while I was deployed in Afghanistan, running supply missions through hostile territory. Her captions would be light and funny. "Another rough day at the office. #blessed. #wine, not wine." Posted the same day I was dodging mortar fire outside Kandahar. When I made it home from my first deployment, she threw another party. This time it was ostensibly to welcome me back, but somehow it turned into a celebration of her recent promotion to account manager. "Elena's been through so much," she told our assembled friends and family. "She deserves to celebrate something happy for once." That phrase, "something happy for once," stuck with me, as if serving my country, protecting supply lines, earning commendations for valor under fire was inherently tragic rather than purposeful, as if I'd been suffering through my military career rather than building it intentionally. The worst part was how everyone nodded along. Our cousin Maria patted my arm sympathetically and said how glad she was that I was finally getting a break. Our neighbor Mr. Henderson asked if I was planning to settle down now and find something less dangerous. Even my parents, who had framed my Bronze Star citation and hung it in their living room, seemed relieved that I was temporarily home and safe.
Cassandra orchestrated it all without saying a word against my career directly. She just created an atmosphere where my military service felt like something to be survived rather than honored, something that required recovery rather than recognition. She positioned herself as the stable, normal sister who provided balance and groundedness to my chaotic, high-risk lifestyle. After my second deployment, when I transitioned to commercial aviation, she attended my graduation from Meridian Airlines training program. She sat in the front row, beamed at me during the ceremony, and posted a beautiful photo of us together afterward. The caption read, "So proud of my sister Elena for finding her passion. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out what you're really meant to do, but she never gave up. Hashtag sister love, hashtag never give up, hashtag proud sister." The post got 847 likes and dozens of comments about what a supportive sister she was. Nobody noticed the implication that my 15-year military career had been me floundering around until I found my passion in civilian flying. Nobody caught the suggestion that I'd been struggling and she'd been patiently waiting for me to figure things out. But I noticed. Just like I'd noticed all the time she'd redirected conversations away from my achievements, made my successes sound like lucky breaks, or framed my career choices as desperate attempts to prove something. Just like I'd noticed that she only called when she needed something, advice about a difficult client, help moving apartments, or someone to listen while she processed relationship drama. The relationship felt increasingly one-sided, but it was subtle enough that pointing it out would make me sound paranoid or competitive. How do you explain to someone that your sister undermines you by being too supportive? How do you articulate that her praise feels like criticism disguised as encouragement? By the time I made captain at 32, the youngest woman ever promoted to that position at Meridian Airlines, I'd learned to keep my celebrations small and my pride quiet. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I'd been trained to expect that my achievements would somehow become about managing other people's reactions to them. So, when I got the promotion, I called my parents first, then my mentor, Captain Rebecca Walsh, then Morrison, who'd become both a trusted co-pilot and genuine friend. I saved Cassandra for last, already bracing myself for whatever creative way she'd find to make this milestone about something else. "Elena, oh my God, that's incredible," she squealed into the phone. "Captain, that's like the highest you can go, right?" Not the highest. There were chief pilot positions, fleet management roles, eventually maybe airline executive tracks. But explaining that would sound like I was correcting her enthusiasm, which would make me seem ungrateful for her support. "It's a big deal," I said carefully. "I worked really hard for it." "Of course you did. You always work so hard. I'm just glad you finally get to relax a little bit now that you've made it." Made it. As if my career was complete now, finished, a box I could check rather than an ongoing journey with new challenges and goals ahead. "Actually, Cass, being a captain means more responsibility and not less. I'm now responsible for—" "Oh, you know what I mean," she laughed. "You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You can just enjoy being successful instead of always chasing the next thing." Always chasing. As if ambition was a character flaw I'd hopefully outgrown. That conversation happened 3 weeks before Thanksgiving dinner in Millbrook, 3 weeks before she called me a fake pilot in front of our extended family, and exactly 6 hours and 27 minutes before I found myself manually controlling a damaged aircraft with 200 lives depending on my supposedly fake expertise. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moments when Cassandra's behavior crossed from sisterly teasing into something darker. It wasn't one dramatic incident, it was a series of calculated moves disguised as accidents, misunderstandings, or well-intentioned mistakes that somehow always happened during my biggest professional moments. The first time I really noticed was during my promotion ceremony to lieutenant colonel at Fairfield Air Base in Nevada. I'd invited the whole family, booked hotel rooms, arranged for a special dinner afterward. This wasn't just any promotion. I was being recognized for developing a new flight training protocol that had reduced accident rates by 30% across 3 different squadrons. The ceremony was going to be covered by Aviation Weekly, and Major General Patricia Hoffman herself was flying in to present my commendation. 2 days before the event, Cassandra called in tears. Her longtime boyfriend Derek had apparently cheated on her with someone from his office, and she just found out through Instagram photos from a company retreat. She was devastated, couldn't stop crying, and desperately needed her big sister. "I know your thing is this weekend, but could I maybe come stay with you for a few days? I can't be alone right now, Elena. I just can't." her thing. That's how she referred to a career milestone I'd been working toward for 8 years. But she was my sister, and she was genuinely hurt, so I said yes. I arranged for her to fly out to Nevada, made space in my small base apartment, even bought groceries for her favorite comfort foods. She arrived the night before the ceremony, red-eyed and fragile, carrying a small suitcase and a bottle of wine. We stayed up to 2 a.m. while she processed the betrayal, analyzed every sign she'd missed, and planned how she'd get her belongings back from Derek's place. I listened, offered tissues, and tried not to think about how exhausted I'd be the next morning.
The ceremony started at 1000 hours. Cassandra, still recovering from her emotional breakdown, chose that morning to have what she called a panic attack in the bathroom of the officers' club. She couldn't breathe, couldn't stop shaking, needed me to sit with her and help her through breathing exercises she'd learned from some wellness app. I missed the first 15 minutes of my own promotion ceremony, including Major General Hoffman's opening remarks about innovative leadership in modern aviation. When I finally made it to the podium, Cassandra was in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with tissues and looking so genuinely distressed that several officers' wives kept glancing over at her with concern. The ceremony continued, but the focus had shifted. Instead of celebrating a professional achievement that would impact flight safety protocols across the entire Western Division, people were whispering about my poor sister, who was clearly going through something terrible. During the reception afterward, more people asked about her well-being than congratulated me on the commendation. When the Aviation Weekly photographer tried to get a shot of me with my new insignia, Cassandra somehow ended up in the frame, still looking beautifully tragic in a way that made the photo unusable for a professional military publication. The backup shots were fine, but not the powerful image of leadership success they'd been hoping to capture. 2 months later, Derek took Cassandra back after what she described as the most romantic apology of all time. She posted their reunion photos on social media with captions about forgiveness and second chances, looking radiant and happy. Somehow, she never mentioned how her panic attack had coincided perfectly with the most important professional moment of my military career. The second incident happened when I received the Distinguished Flying Cross for my actions during a particularly dangerous medical evacuation mission in Afghanistan. The ceremony was being held at the Pentagon, with Secretary of Defense William Crawford presenting the medal personally. My parents had flown in from Oregon, and I had arranged for special clearance so they could witness their daughter receiving one of the military's highest honors for aerial achievement. 3 days before the ceremony, Cassandra announced she was getting married. Not engaged. Married. She and Derek had decided on a spontaneous destination wedding in Costa Rica, and they were flying out in 48 hours. She called me from the airport, breathless with excitement. "I know the timing is crazy," she said, "but we found this amazing resort with a last-minute cancellation, and Derek's friend owns a chartered plane company, so we're getting this incredible deal. The whole thing is going to cost less than a normal wedding." She wanted me to be her maid of honor, of course, over video call from a beach in Guanacaste province. Could I possibly rearrange my Pentagon thing by a day or two? Or maybe just FaceTime in during her ceremony? It would mean so much to have her big sister there for the most important day of her life. I explained that military ceremonies couldn't be rescheduled like dinner reservations, especially when they involved the Secretary of Defense and international media coverage. I explained that this medal represented not just my individual achievement, but recognition for the entire medical evacuation unit that had saved 43 lives during that deployment. "Oh, Elena," she sighed, "you always make everything so complicated. It's just a medal ceremony, right? I mean, you already know you won it. Can't you just pick up the medal later?" Just a medal ceremony. She'd reduced the highest recognition of my military career to a clerical task that could be handled at my convenience. She got married on a beach in Costa Rica while I stood at attention in the Pentagon as Secretary Crawford spoke about courage, sacrifice, and the extraordinary skill required to execute a medical evacuation under heavy fire. The photos from her wedding were stunning. Golden sunset, white dress blowing in the ocean breeze, Derek looking handsome in his linen suit. Her social media posts from that day got over 2,000 likes. The photos from my medal ceremony were featured on the Defense Department's official website and in Stars and Stripes, but Cassandra never shared them. When people asked about her sister's military service, she'd mention that I got some kind of award once, but immediately pivot to talking about her honeymoon adventures in the Costa Rican rainforest. The third incident was the most telling. When I transitioned out of the military and started flying for Meridian Airlines, I was selected for their inaugural flight on a new intercontinental route from Portland to Tokyo, a prestigious assignment that would establish me as one of the lead pilots for their Pacific expansion. The flight would carry VIP passengers, including business executives, diplomats, and travel journalists who would write reviews that could make or break the new route. I'd been preparing for months, studying weather patterns over the North Pacific, reviewing emergency protocols for extended oceanic flights, and working with Meridian's public relations team on interviews and promotional materials. This wasn't just a flight. It was a statement about the future of trans-Pacific commercial aviation, and I was going to be the captain who made it happen. 2 weeks before the inaugural flight, Cassandra called with urgent news. She was pregnant, 10 weeks along, but there were complications. The doctors were concerned about placental positioning and wanted her on bed rest immediately. Derek was traveling for work and wouldn't be back for another month. She needed someone to take care of her, help her with groceries and appointments, and provide emotional support during what could be a high-risk pregnancy. "I know you're busy with your new job," she said, "but I'm really scared, Alina. What if something happens to the baby? What if I lose it because I don't have anyone here to help me?" This was different from the previous incidents because the stakes felt genuinely life-threatening. This wasn't about heartbreak or wedding timing. This was about my sister potentially losing a pregnancy and having no support system. How could I prioritize a flight route, even an important one, over my sister's health and my future nephew or niece? I requested emergency family leave from Meridian Airlines. Captain Rebecca Walsh covered the inaugural flight, and she did beautifully. The route launch was featured in Travel and Leisure as one of the year's most successful new airline ventures. But it was her success, not mine. Her photo appeared in the airline's annual report, her quotes were featured in aviation trade magazines, and her name became associated with Meridian's expansion into Asian markets. I spent 3 weeks in Portland, grocery shopping, driving Cassandra to medical appointments, and helping her set up a nursery. She seemed genuinely grateful, constantly thanking me for sacrificing my big opportunity to support her family. On the day I was supposed to fly back to Seattle and resume my regular schedule, Cassandra got the all-clear from her doctor. The placenta had shifted into a normal position, the bed rest could be lifted, and Derek was coming home 2 weeks early after all. The high-risk pregnancy had resolved into a completely normal situation that no longer required any special care. "Oh, Elena, isn't that wonderful?" She beamed, practically glowing with health and happiness. "I guess I won't need you to stay after all. Derek and I can handle everything from here." I congratulated her, hugged her goodbye, and drove to the airport feeling something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger, exactly, and it wasn't suspicion. It was more like the slow recognition that I'd been playing a game where only one person knew the rules, and those rules never seemed to work in my favor. When I got home to Seattle, I found a care package waiting outside my apartment door. Expensive lotions, gourmet chocolates, and a handwritten note from Cassandra. "Thank you for always being there when I need you most. You're the best big sister in the world. I don't know what I'd do without you." The inaugural Tokyo flight happened every week for the rest of that year. Captain Walsh became the face of Meridian's Pacific expansion, earned a commendation for excellent customer service ratings, and eventually got promoted to chief pilot for international routes. That should have been my trajectory, my recognition, my career milestone. But somehow, in ways that looked completely reasonable and loving from the outside, Cassandra had needed me elsewhere. My phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. "Call me when you get a chance. Good news to share." I smiled, despite my exhaustion. Maybe she had some positive development in her life that wouldn't require my immediate intervention. Derek had been traveling extensively for his job with an international consulting firm, and she'd been dealing with some loneliness and boredom while adjusting to married life. It would be nice to hear about something going well for her. I called her back during my lunch break, expecting to hear about a new hobby she'd discovered, or maybe news about their plans to start trying for children. Instead, her voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "Elena, oh my God, you're never going to believe what happened. Derek just got offered the most amazing opportunity." She launched into a detailed explanation of how Derek's company had been selected to lead a major infrastructure development project in Southeast Asia. It was a 2-year contract based primarily in Vietnam and Cambodia, with potential extensions into Laos and Myanmar. The financial compensation was extraordinary, and it would establish Derek as one of the premier international development consultants in his field. "That sounds incredible for him," I said, genuinely happy to hear about Derek's success. "What an opportunity to make a real impact." "Well, that's the thing," Cassandra continued, her voice taking on a slightly different tone. "The contract includes provisions for spouses, full housing allowance, international health insurance, even a budget for domestic help and language tutoring. Derek wants me to come with him." My first thought was how exciting that would be for her. Cassandra had always been interested in travel and international cultures, but Derek's previous work had kept them mostly confined to domestic projects. This could be exactly the kind of adventure she'd been craving. "Cass, that sounds like an amazing experience. When would you leave?" "That's where it gets complicated," she said, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "The contract starts November 20th. Derek needs to be in Hanoi by November 18th for orientation meetings, which means we'd need to fly out of Portland on November 16th. November 16th, one day after Operation Skybridge, one day after the most important professional challenge of my entire career. The FAA exercise could determine the future of international aviation safety protocols. I can't just—" "Elena," she interrupted, and her voice had shifted to something small and vulnerable that I hadn't heard since we were children. "I'm really scared. This feels like the biggest decision I've ever made, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to handle it alone. Derek thinks I'm being dramatic, but you understand what it's like to take big risks for your career. You've always been the brave one in our family." The brave one. She was framing this as if courage was something I'd been born with rather than something I'd developed through years of deliberate challenges and careful preparation. But she was also clearly struggling with a genuinely difficult life transition, and she was asking for the kind of sisterly support that most people would consider completely reasonable. "What about Mom and Dad? They could help you with the logistics, and they'd probably love to spend extra time with you before you leave for 2 years. They're already freaking out about me moving so far away. Dad keeps asking questions about political stability in Vietnam, and Mom has been sending me articles about tropical diseases and air quality. They mean well, but they're making me more anxious, not less." She was right about our parents. They'd been supportive of Derek's career advancement, but the idea of their youngest daughter living in Southeast Asia for 2 years was causing them significant worry. They'd probably spend the week before her departure trying to talk her out of going, rather than helping her prepare confidently for the adventure. "Elena, I know what I'm asking is huge, but you're the only person who really understands what it means to make sacrifices for important opportunities. You've built your entire career on being willing to take calculated risks and push yourself beyond your comfort zone. I need some of that strength right now." She was appealing to my professional identity, positioning my potential help as a natural extension of the leadership skills I developed in aviation. It was a sophisticated form of flattery that acknowledged my expertise while making her request seem like a logical application of my capabilities. "I just need 4 days," she continued. "November 11th through 14th. We could spend the time really talking through everything. Maybe visit some of the places in Portland that I'll miss most. Help me pack thoughtfully instead of frantically. Then you'd still have November 15th to focus completely on your simulation. 4 days during the most critical preparation period for the most important professional opportunity of my life. 4 days when I should be fine-tuning communication protocols, reviewing contingency plans, and ensuring that every detail of a massively complex international aviation exercise was perfect. But she was my sister, and she was genuinely scared, and she was asking for help with what was undeniably one of the biggest transitions of her adult life. As I sat in my apartment that night, staring at my Operation Skybridge preparation materials spread across every surface, I found myself calculating whether it was possible to compress a week's worth of final preparations into 3 days, whether I could review international coordination protocols on the flight to Portland, whether the most important professional moment of my career could survive being slightly less perfectly prepared. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about aviation safety or emergency response procedures. I was thinking about my sister's scared voice and her request for help during a genuinely challenging time. And I was about to make another choice that would cost me more than I realized. I should have known something was wrong when Cassandra called me 3 times in one day, each conversation building on the previous one like layers of emotional sediment designed to wear down my resistance. The first call came during my morning briefing with the FAA coordination team, the second during my lunch meeting with Captain Torres from the Air National Guard, and the third while I was reviewing weather contingency plans with Morrison at nearly 10 o'clock that night. Each time she had just one more concern, one additional worry that required my immediate input and reassurance. Could I help her research international banking options for managing finances while living abroad? Did I think she should ship her art supplies or try to replace them in Vietnam? Would I mind calling her college friend Rachel, who had lived in Bangkok for 6 months, to get advice about cultural adjustment strategies? What made the requests particularly insidious was how reasonable each one sounded in isolation. These were genuine logistical challenges that any person facing a major international relocation would need to address. But the cumulative effect was a constant stream of interruptions during my most critical preparation period, each one positioned as urgent enough to require immediate attention. By the 4th day of this pattern, I realized what was happening. Cassandra wasn't just asking for help with her move, she was systematically dismantling my focus and preparation time through what appeared to be legitimate sisterly requests. Every phone call pulled me away from Operation Skybridge materials. Every quick question required me to shift mental gears from aviation emergency protocols to international relocation logistics. Elena, I'm so sorry to bother you again, but I just got off the phone with Derek and he mentioned something that's got me really worried. I was in the middle of reviewing radio communication procedures with the team from the International Civil Aviation Organization, trying to memorize call signs and emergency frequencies for aircraft from 6 different countries. The binder in front of me contained protocols that could literally mean the difference between life and death if a real emergency occurred during the exercise. "What's wrong?" I asked, stepping away from the conference table and walking into the hallway for privacy. Derek just found out that the housing situation in Hanoi is way more complicated than his company initially described. Apparently, the apartments they arrange for international families are in a compound that's pretty isolated from the city center. No public transportation access, very limited English-speaking services, and most of the other expatriate families have children. So there's not much of a social community for women without kids. She paused, letting this information settle. I could hear the genuine anxiety in her voice, but I was also starting to recognize how strategically she presented each new crisis. "Elena, I'm starting to think I might not be cut out for this. Maybe I should just stay in Portland and let Derek go alone for the first year, then reassess whether it makes sense for me to join him later." This was the opening I'd been hoping for. A reasonable compromise that would allow Derek to pursue his career opportunity without requiring Cassandra to make such a dramatic life change before she felt ready. It would also eliminate the timeline conflict that was threatening my Operation Skybridge preparations. "That sounds like it might be a smart approach," I said carefully. "Give yourself more time to prepare,
let Derek get established first, and then make a decision based on better information about what the experience would actually be like.
But that's the problem, she continued, her voice taking on a more urgent tone. Derek is really upset about the idea of going alone. He says this is supposed to be an adventure we take together, and if I don't come with him now, it changes the whole dynamic of our marriage. He's worried that if I stay behind, we'll grow apart during the separation. She let that sink in for a moment, then delivered the emotional crescendo I was beginning to expect. Alina, I think my marriage might be in real trouble if I don't figure this out. Derek actually said that choosing to stay behind would show that I'm not committed to building a life together, that I'm prioritizing my comfort over our partnership. My protective instincts flared immediately. Derek was essentially giving Cassandra an ultimatum. Come with me to Southeast Asia, or our marriage suffers. That kind of pressure tactics didn't sit well with me. And I found myself getting angry on her behalf. Kaz, that's not fair of him. Marriage should be about supporting each other's decisions, not forcing ultimatums about major life changes. I know, she said quickly, but I also understand his perspective. This is the biggest opportunity of his career, and he wants to share it with his wife. Maybe I'm being selfish by letting my fears get in the way? She was doing something I'd seen before, presenting Derek's unreasonable demands as if they might be legitimate, then positioning her natural reluctance as a character flaw. It was a pattern I'd made me want to intervene more decisively. Alina, I think I need to go with him. I think our marriage depends on it. But I can't handle all of this preparation and emotional processing alone. Could you maybe consider taking just a few days off from your simulation prep to help me get ready? Not the whole week, maybe just 3 days. 3 days. She was negotiating down from her original request, making the compromise seem reasonable and manageable. But 3 days during the final preparation period would still mean missing crucial coordination meetings, abbreviated simulation runs, and less thorough review of emergency protocols that international observers would be evaluating. Cassandra, I understand you're in a difficult position, but Operation Skybridge is literally the most important professional challenge of my entire career. The preparation schedule isn't flexible. There are international representatives, coordinated training exercises, and safety protocols that require precise timing. I know, and I hate asking, she said, her voice getting smaller. But Alina, you're the only person who understands what it's like to make big sacrifices for career advancement. You've always been willing to take calculated risks, and you've built your whole life around being strong enough to handle pressure situations. She was framing my potential help as a natural extension of my professional strengths, as if supporting her through this crisis would demonstrate the same leadership qualities that made me successful in aviation. It was psychological manipulation disguised as a compliment. What if something goes wrong while Derek and I are in Vietnam? What if I have some kind of breakdown from the isolation and stress? What if our marriage falls apart because I wasn't emotionally prepared for such a dramatic life change? I'd never forgive myself for not asking for help when I needed it most. Now she was presenting catastrophic scenarios that could result from my refusal to help, making me partially responsible for potential future disasters in her life. If I said no, and her marriage or mental health suffered during the international move, I'd bear some of the guilt for not providing support when she'd explicitly asked for it. Elena, you always say that aviation is about calculated risk management and thorough preparation. This move to Vietnam is the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life. Shouldn't I approach it with the same level of careful preparation you'd use for a complex flight operation? She was using my own professional philosophy against me, suggesting that thorough preparation for her life transition was analogous to the safety protocols I followed in aviation. The implication was that if preparation was important enough to justify my obsessive attention to Operation Skybridge details, it should also justify helping her prepare properly for an equally significant life change. I'm not asking you to choose between my needs and your career. I'm asking you to help me be brave enough to take a risk that could change my entire future. Isn't that what sisters do for each other? The conversation was becoming a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She'd presented the situation as a genuine crisis requiring immediate intervention, positioned Derek's ultimatum as potentially reasonable,
framed her fears as potentially catastrophic if not properly addressed, and used my own professional values to justify why helping her should take priority over my career preparation. Just 3 days, she repeated, November 12th through 14th. We could spend the time really working through all the logistics and emotional preparation, and then you'd still have November 15th to focus completely on your exercise. 1 day. She was asking me to compress a week's worth of final preparation for the most important professional challenge of my career into a single day. 1 day to review international coordination protocols, complete final simulation runs, and ensure that every detail of a massively complex aviation exercise was perfect.
Alina, I know what I'm asking is huge, but I also know that you're the kind of person who finds a way to make the impossible work. You've spent your entire career proving that thorough preparation and exceptional skill can overcome any challenge. Couldn't you apply those same abilities to help both of us succeed? She was betting on my professional pride, my history of finding solutions to complex problems, and my deep-seated need to be the responsible one who makes everything work. She was counting on the fact that I'd rather compromise my own preparation than risk being responsible for her marriage falling apart or her suffering a mental health crisis in a foreign country. And as I stood in that hallway, holding my phone while my Operation Skybridge team waited for me to return to our critical planning session, I realized she was probably right. I was going to say yes, despite knowing that it would compromise my preparation for the most important professional opportunity of my life. Despite recognizing this sophisticated emotional manipulation underlying her request, despite understanding that I was once again being asked to sacrifice my career advancement to manage the consequences of choices that weren't my own. Because at the end of the day, I was still Alina Vesquez, the responsible sister who found a way to make everything work, even when it cost me everything I'd worked for. Okay, I said quietly. 3 days. But Cassandra, this is the last time. After this, you're going to need to handle your major life decisions without requiring me to sacrifice my career milestones. Of course, she said quickly, relief flooding her voice. Alina, you're literally saving my life right now. I promise I'll make this up to you. As I hung up the phone and walked back into the conference room where Director Angela Hartwell from the International Civil Aviation Organization was reviewing emergency communication protocols with representatives from Canada, Australia, Japan, and the United Kingdom, these people had flown thousands of miles to coordinate an exercise that could revolutionize international aviation safety. They were depending on my leadership, my preparation, and my complete professional focus. Captain Vasquez, Director Hartwell said as I took my seat, we were just discussing the backup communication systems for aircraft operating beyond standard radar coverage. Could you walk us through the protocol for coordinating emergency landings when primary radio contact is compromised? I opened my mouth to respond with the detailed procedures I'd spent months memorizing, but instead of technical specifications, what came out was, Director Hartwell, I need to make a phone call. Could we take a 15-minute break? The room went quiet. These were people who had scheduled their time in precise increments, who had traveled internationally for meetings that were planned months in advance. Asking for an unscheduled break during critical coordination discussions was not something a lead captain did lightly. Of course, Director Hartwell said, though I could see the slight confusion in her expression, we'll reconvene in 15 minutes. I walked back into the hallway and called Cassandra. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright with the happiness of someone who had just gotten exactly what she wanted. Alina, I was just about to start researching flight options for you to come to Portland. I found some great deals for November 12th, and I've already started making a list of everything we need to accomplish while you're here. Cassandra? I'm not coming. Silence. Then, in a much smaller voice, what do you mean you're not coming? We just talked about this. You said you'd help me. I changed my mind. Elena, you can't change your mind. I've already started making plans based on you being here. Derek is counting on this. Our entire preparation timeline assumes you'll be available to help with... Then you'll need to make different plans. I could hear her breathing change, that subtle shift that usually preceded either tears or anger. With Cassandra, it was often both. Elena, what's going on? This isn't like you. You always follow through on commitments. You're the responsible one. The responsible one. There it was again, the label that had defined our entire relationship, the role that had cost me promotion ceremonies, medal presentations, inaugural flights, and now potentially the most important aviation safety exercise in modern history. Cassandra, do you know what I've been doing for the past 6 months? Well, yes, preparing for your simulation thing? Operation Skybridge, the most comprehensive aviation safety exercise ever conducted. 12 commercial aircraft, 4 military transports, 6 medical helicopters, coordination with emergency response agencies across 4 states, international observers from 7 countries, and protocols that could save thousands of lives in real-world disasters. Elena, I know it's important to you.
It's not important to me. It's important to the future of international aviation safety. It's important to every passenger who will fly on a commercial aircraft for the next 20 years. It's important to emergency responders who need to coordinate disaster relief efforts. And you want me to compromise my preparation for this exercise so I can help you decide what artwork to pack for your husband's career advancement opportunity? That's not fair, she said, her voice getting tighter. This isn't just about packing. This is about my marriage, my future, my mental health. I thought you understood that. I do understand it. And I also understand that you've been systematically calling me during every critical meeting I've had this week, interrupting my preparation with requests that could be handled by any number of other people, and using emotional manipulation to make your poor planning my professional emergency. Another silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted to something I hadn't heard since we were teenagers. Elena, you're being incredibly selfish right now. I'm facing the biggest decision of my life, and instead of supporting me like family is supposed to do, you're prioritizing your job over your sister. My job, Cassandra, involves keeping people alive. My preparation for this exercise isn't about career advancement. It's about ensuring that if a real emergency happens during international air travel, the response protocols work correctly. People don't die because I wasn't thorough enough in my preparation. Don't be so dramatic. It's a simulation. It's not like actual lives are at stake. That sentence hung in the air between us like a physical object. She had just dismissed the most important professional challenge of my career as pretend, as if the protocols we were developing wouldn't be implemented in real-world emergency situations where actual human beings would depend on the procedures we were perfecting. Elena, I want you to listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. I'm not coming to Portland. I'm not helping you pack. I'm not researching international banking options or calling your friend Rachel or providing emotional support while you decide whether to follow your husband to Southeast Asia. You're a 30-year-old married woman, and you're going to handle this decision like an adult. Elena, I'm not finished. For the past 15 years, I have rearranged my schedule, sacrificed my opportunities, and compromised my professional commitments every time you decided you needed something from me. And every time, without exception, your crisis resolved itself perfectly well without requiring the extreme measures you claimed were necessary. That's not true. Your panic attack during my promotion ceremony? Derek took you back 2 months later. Your emergency wedding that conflicted with my medal ceremony? You'd been planning it for weeks. Your high-risk pregnancy that required 3 weeks of care? The doctor cleared you the day I was supposed to fly back to Seattle. I could hear her breathing getting faster, but I continued. And now you want me to believe that your marriage will fall apart and you'll have a mental breakdown in Vietnam if I don't spend 3 days helping you prepare for an international move that millions of expatriate spouses handle every year without requiring their siblings to sacrifice major career opportunities?
Elena, you're twisting everything. I never meant for what, Cassandra? I never meant for me to notice the pattern. I never meant for me to realize that every one of your emergencies happens to coincide with my biggest professional moments. I never meant for me to figure out that you've been using emotional manipulation disguised as family loyalty to keep me available as your personal support system. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, in a voice so small I almost couldn't hear it, Elena, I don't understand why you're being so mean to me. Mean. After 15 years of managing her crises, cleaning up her emotional disasters, and sacrificing my own milestones to provide support she never actually needed, she was calling me mean for finally setting a boundary. Cassandra, I'm not being mean. I'm being honest. And here's some more honesty. I think your marriage to Derek will be fine whether I help you pack or not. I think you're capable of researching international banking and cultural adjustment without my assistance. And I think you're strong enough to handle a major life transition without requiring her sister to compromise the most important professional opportunity of her career. But but more than that, I think you know all of this already. I think you've always known that your emergencies weren't actually emergencies, that your crises weren't actually crises, and that you were asking me to sacrifice real opportunities to provide unnecessary support for manufactured problems. She was crying now, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. Elena, I can't believe you're saying these things to me. After everything we've gone through together, after all the times I've supported you. When have you supported me, Cassandra? When have you ever made a sacrifice for my career, my opportunities, or my important moments? I've always been proud of you. Being proud isn't the same as being supportive. Posting congratulations on social media isn't the same as showing up. And being family isn't the same as being entitled to disrupt someone else's life whenever it's convenient for you. Elena, please don't do this. Please don't abandon me right when I need you most. Abandon. That was the word she had been saving. The final manipulation, the ultimate guilt trip. She was framing my refusal to sacrifice my career preparation as abandonment, as if setting professional boundaries was equivalent to ending our relationship.
Cassandra, I'm not abandoning you. I'm declining to prioritize your convenience over my professional responsibilities. There's a difference. Elena, I love you, Cassandra, but I'm done being your emergency contact for situations you can handle yourself. I'm done rearranging my life to accommodate crises that mysteriously resolve themselves as soon as I've sacrificed whatever I was working toward. And I'm especially done pretending that your poor planning constitutes a family emergency that justifies me compromising my career. So that's it, she said, her voice getting harder. You're just going to choose your job over your sister? I'm choosing my professional integrity over your emotional manipulation. And honestly, the fact that you're framing it as abandonment instead of recognizing that you've been asking for something unreasonable tells me everything I need to know about whether this boundary is necessary. I ended the call before she could respond, turned off my phone, and walked back into the conference room where international aviation safety officials were waiting to continue planning an exercise that could revolutionize emergency response protocols worldwide. Director Hartwell, I said as I took my seat, let's continue with the backup communication systems. I believe we were discussing protocols for aircraft operating beyond standard radar coverage. For the first time in 15 years, I was about to give my complete, undivided professional attention to something that mattered more than managing my sister's emotional crises. And it felt like the most responsible thing I'd ever done. Operation Skybridge launched at exactly 0600 hours on November 15th with the precision of a Swiss chronometer and the complexity of a space shuttle mission. From my position in the captain's seat of Meridian Flight 2847, the designated command aircraft for the entire exercise, I could see the choreographed dance of 23 aircraft spread across the southwestern United States, each pilot and crew following protocols that had been refined through months of preparation. The simulated emergency was unfolding perfectly,
A magnitude 7.8 earthquake had struck the Phoenix metropolitan area at 0630, closing Sky Harbor International Airport and creating a humanitarian crisis requiring immediate aviation response. Commercial flights bound for Phoenix were being diverted to alternate airports across Arizona, New Mexico, and California. Medical helicopters were coordinating patient transfers between overwhelmed hospitals. Military transports were delivering emergency supplies to staging areas throughout the affected region. My role was to serve as the central coordination point for all aircraft operations, maintaining communication with ground-based emergency management agencies while ensuring that every plane, helicopter, and transport in the exercise operated safely within the new crisis management protocol framework. It was like conducting an orchestra where every musician was playing from a different location, but the symphony they created together could save thousands of lives in a real disaster. Command 2847, this is Medical Flight 7, came the voice of Captain Sandra Chen from one of the emergency helicopters participating in the exercise. We're approaching Phoenix Metro Hospital with 3 critical patients from this simulated collapse site, requesting priority landing clearance and coordination with ground medical teams. Medical Flight 7, Command 2847. I responded, checking my coordination board, where every aircraft was represented by a moving dot on a digital map. You're cleared for priority landing at Phoenix Metro, Pad 3. Ground medical teams are standing by. Be advised, Cargo Transport 12 is approaching your airspace. Coordinate with them for vertical separation. This was exactly the kind of complex coordination that the new protocol was designed to handle. In a real disaster, those medical helicopters would be carrying actual trauma patients whose survival depended on seamless communication between air and ground teams. The cargo transports would be delivering critical supplies, blood products, surgical equipment, emergency generators that hospitals needed to maintain operations during infrastructure failures. Morrison, serving as my co-pilot and secondary coordinator, was monitoring weather conditions across the exercise area while maintaining radio contact with air traffic control facilities in 4 different states. Alina, we've got weather moving in from the west that could complicate operations at the Tucson diversion site. Should we begin repositioning aircraft to the backup airfield at Flagstaff? I was reviewing weather radar data and calculating fuel consumption for the affected aircraft when my personal phone, which I'd placed on silent during the exercise, lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID showed Cassandra Mobile, and for a moment I felt a familiar jolt of anxiety. She was supposed to be on a plane to Vietnam with Derek at this exact moment. They were scheduled to depart Portland at 8 a.m. West Coast time, which meant they should have been in the air for over 2 hours. I ignored the call and focused on the weather coordination issue Morrison had raised. Let's start moving the Phoenix-bound flights from Tucson to Flagstaff. Contact the Flagstaff Tower and confirm they're ready to receive 6 additional diversions. The phone lit up immediately again, then a 3rd time, then a 4th time. Morrison glanced over at the constantly flashing screen. Alina, do you need to take that? If it's a family emergency. It's not, I said firmly, but I could feel my concentration fragmenting. Cassandra was supposed to be on an international flight. The only reason she'd be calling during Operation Skybridge was if something had catastrophically gone wrong with her departure. Had their flight been canceled? Had Derek changed his mind about the job? Had she suffered some kind of medical emergency at the airport? My phone buzzed with a text message. Alina, please answer. Emergency at airport, need you now. The word emergency sent adrenaline shooting through my system, despite my rational knowledge that Cassandra's emergencies had historically been manufactured crises designed to redirect my attention. But what if this time was different? What if she was genuinely stranded at Portland International Airport, alone and panicking while Derek's flight departed without her?
Command 2847, this is International Observer 1, came a crisp British accent through my headset. Squadron Leader James Morrison, not my co-pilot Morrison, but the Royal Air Force representative monitoring our exercise from the command center in Denver. We're showing excellent coordination between your aircraft and ground agencies. Could you walk us through your decision-making process for the weather-related diversions? This was exactly the kind of real-time evaluation that could determine whether the crisis management protocol would be adopted internationally. Representatives from 7 countries were watching how I handled complex, evolving situations under pressure. Their assessment reports would influence aviation safety procedures for decades to come. International Observer 1, Command 2847, I began, but my phone was buzzing again with another call from Cassandra. The weather diversion protocol prioritizes passenger safety while maintaining efficient traffic flow to... My phone lit up with multiple text messages in rapid succession. Flight canceled, mechanical problem, Derek furious. Stranded at airport, all hotels booked, can't get home. Having panic attack, can't breathe, need you here. Please, Elena, I'm scared and alone. Don't know what to do, Derek not answering phone. The messages painted a picture of a genuine crisis unfolding in real time. Cassandra stranded at an airport during what was supposed to be the most important day of her married life. Derek, apparently unreachable, no way to get home or find accommodation, and a panic attack severe enough that she couldn't manage the situation independently. Elena, Morrison whispered, your phone is lighting up like a Christmas tree. Are you sure everything's okay? I looked at my coordination board where 23 aircraft were operating in perfect harmony according to protocols I'd spent 6 months developing. I looked at my radio panel where voices from 4 countries were coordinating the most complex aviation exercise in modern history. I looked at my phone where my sister was apparently experiencing a genuine emergency that required immediate intervention. For 15 years, I'd chosen Cassandra's crises over my professional opportunities. For 15 years, I'd believed that being a good sister meant sacrificing my career advancement whenever she needed support. For 15 years, I'd told myself that family obligations outweighed professional responsibilities. But sitting in that cockpit, serving as the command pilot for an exercise that could revolutionize international aviation safety, I finally understood something fundamental about priorities and professional integrity. Morrison, I said quietly, could you take over radio communications with the international observers for a moment? I need to handle something. I reached for my phone and typed a single text message. Cassandra, I'm in the middle of commanding a multinational aviation safety exercise. I cannot help you right now. Contact airport customer service, call mom and dad, or figure this out yourself. I'll call you tonight. Then I turned off the phone completely and slipped it into my flight bag. Command 2847, this is Cargo Transport 5, came a voice through my headset. We're showing a hydraulic pressure warning light on approach to the Flagstaff diversion site. Requesting guidance on emergency landing procedures. And there it was, a real emergency developing within the exercise, exactly the kind of situation the crisis management protocol was designed to handle. An aircraft with potential mechanical problems approaching an airport that was already managing diverted traffic from the simulated Phoenix disaster. This was why I spent 6 months preparing. This was why international observers were monitoring our every decision. This was why compromising my focus for another one of Cassandra's manufactured crises would have been more than just a professional mistake. It would have been a betrayal of every pilot and passenger who would depend on these protocols in real emergencies. Cargo Transport 5, Command 2847, I responded, my training taking over completely. We're going to walk you through emergency approach procedures for hydraulic failure. First, I need you to run your backup systems check. As I guided the cargo transport through emergency protocols while coordinating with ground controllers, emergency vehicles, and other aircraft in the area, my phone stayed silent and dark in my flight bag. For the first time in 15 years, when Cassandra had created another perfectly timed crisis designed to pull my attention away from a crucial professional moment, I wasn't available to manage it for her. And the world didn't end. The aircraft landed safely, the exercise continued flawlessly, the international observers documented procedures that would enhance aviation safety globally. But in Portland, Oregon, Cassandra was about to learn what it felt like when her emergency contact was no longer available to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. Later that evening, when Operation Skybridge concluded with perfect safety records and international praise for the new protocols, I finally turned my phone back on. There were 37 missed calls from Cassandra, 43 text messages ranging from panicked to furious, and one voicemail that started with sobbing and ended with words I'd never heard my sister say to me before. Elena, I can't believe you abandoned me when I needed you most. After everything I've done for you, after all the times I've supported you, you couldn't take 5 minutes to help me when I was having the worst day of my life? I guess I finally know what kind of person you really are. As I listened to that message while sitting in the hotel bar with Morrison, Director Hartwell, and the International Observer team, all of whom were celebrating the most successful aviation safety exercise in modern history, I realized that Cassandra was absolutely right. She finally knew what kind of person I really was. I was the kind of person who prioritized international aviation safety over manufactured family drama. I was the kind of person who could remain focused on life and death professional responsibilities, even when emotionally manipulated. I was the kind of person who understood that some moments are too important to be interrupted by people who confuse attention-seeking with genuine emergencies.
And for the first time in my life, I was proud of exactly that kind of person. The promotion to chief pilot for emergency operations came through exactly 3 weeks after Operation Skybridge, delivered personally by Meridian Airlines CEO Victoria Sterling during a ceremony at the company's headquarters in Seattle. The position was everything I'd worked toward for 15 years. Oversight of crisis response protocols across Meridian's entire fleet, liaison work with international aviation safety organizations, and responsibility for training the next generation of emergency response pilots. But the real validation came 2 days earlier, when I received a call from Director Angela Hartwell at the International Civil Aviation Organization. The crisis management protocol we tested during Operation Skybridge was being recommended for global implementation across all member nations. The exercise had demonstrated flawless coordination under pressure, exceptional leadership during real emergencies, like the hydraulic failure we'd managed during the simulation, and protocols that could genuinely save thousands of lives in future disasters. Captain Vasquez, Director Hartwell had said during our call, the International Observer team was unanimous in their assessment. Your leadership during Operation Skybridge represents the gold standard for aviation crisis management. We'd like to invite you to serve as a consultant for the global rollout of these protocols. I accepted immediately. This wasn't just career advancement. It was the opportunity to influence international aviation safety standards for decades to come. Every protocol we'd developed, every coordination procedure we'd refined, every emergency response technique we'd perfected would now be implemented by airlines around the world. The irony wasn't lost on me that the most significant professional achievement of my life had happened precisely because I'd finally refused to be distracted by one of Cassandra's manufactured crises. My parents called the day after the promotion was announced, their voices warm with the kind of pride I hadn't heard since my Bronze Star ceremony years earlier. My father, Miguel, spoke first. Elena, your mother and I saw the article in the aviation magazine about your new position. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. It says here you'll be working with airlines in 12 different countries. That's incredible, mija. You're going to help keep so many people safe. There was a pause, and I could sense they had something else to say. Finally, my father continued, more carefully. Elena, Cassandra called us last week. She was very upset about something that happened during your big exercise. She said you wouldn't help her when she had an emergency at the airport. I'd been waiting for this conversation since the day of Operation Skybridge, and I decided I would handle it with the same professional directness I use in aviation emergencies. Clear communication, no emotional manipulation, just facts. Dad, Cassandra didn't have an emergency. She had a flight delay that she wanted me to manage for her while I was commanding a multinational aviation safety exercise. She said their plane to Vietnam was canceled and she was stranded.
Their flight was delayed by 3 hours due to a minor mechanical issue. Derek was with her the entire time. They ultimately made it to Vietnam 2 days later than originally planned. And according to her social media posts, they're having a wonderful time in Hanoi. My mother's voice got softer. Mija, she said you turned off your phone and ignored her when she was scared and alone. Mom, I was serving as the command pilot for 23 aircraft during an international emergency response exercise. Turning off my personal phone during a professional emergency was exactly what any responsible pilot would do. But she's your sister, my mother said, as if that settled everything. Yes, she is, and I love her. But being someone's sister doesn't mean being available to manage their emotional reactions to routine travel delays while I'm commanding aircraft that could crash if I'm not focused on my job. There was a long silence. Then my father spoke again, this time with something that sounded almost like relief. Elena, your mother and I have been talking about this. We've watched Cassandra call you every time something goes wrong in her life for years now. And we've watched you drop everything to help her, even when it cost you important opportunities. That admission hit me harder than I had expected. They had been watching. They had seen the pattern. They had understood, at least partially, what had been happening. We should have said something sooner, my mother added quietly. We should have told Cassandra that she couldn't keep treating you like her personal emergency service. But we thought family should help family. Family should help family, but help should be reciprocal, reasonable, and based on genuine need rather than manufactured crises designed to redirect attention during important moments. My father cleared his throat. Elena, we want you to know that we're proud of you for focusing on your work. What you're doing, keeping people safe, developing better emergency procedures, it's more important than managing your sister's travel anxiety. That conversation with my parents represented something I hadn't experienced since childhood. Unconditional family support that didn't require me to sacrifice my own interests or manage someone else's emotional reactions. The contrast became even starker when Derek called me directly 2 weeks later. He and Cassandra had been in Vietnam for over a month, and he wanted to apologize for what happened during Operation Skybridge. Elena, I need you to know that Cassandra never told me she was planning to call you during your big exercise. If I'd known, I would have stopped her.
Derek explained that their flight delay had been announced at the gate with a clear timeline for departure. Customer service had provided meal vouchers and priority rebooking. The airline had arranged ground transportation and hotel accommodations for passengers who preferred to wait overnight rather than take the delayed evening flight. Cassandra knew we had options, Derek said. She knew exactly how to handle the situation, but she was angry that you hadn't come to Portland to help her prepare, and she wanted to prove that you'd made the wrong choice by refusing to support her. The sabotage had been completely intentional. Cassandra had deliberately created a fake emergency during the most important professional moment of my life, not because she needed help, but because she wanted to punish me for finally setting boundaries. Derek, why are you telling me this? Because I've been married to Cassandra for 2 years now, and I've watched her do this to you over and over. She creates drama when you have good things happening, then makes you feel guilty for not dropping everything to manage the drama she created. It's not fair, and it's not normal. He paused, then continued with something that sounded like years of accumulated frustration. Elena, Cassandra is perfectly capable of handling her own problems. She managed our entire international move once she realized you weren't going to rescue her from it. She's figured out banking, housing, cultural adjustment, language barriers, and social isolation without requiring anyone else to sacrifice their career opportunities. She only acts helpless when she wants someone else to prioritize her needs over their own responsibilities. That conversation was the final piece of confirmation I needed. Cassandra's emergencies weren't emergencies. They were power plays disguised as vulnerability. Her crises weren't crises. They were attention-seeking behaviors that she used to maintain control over other people's schedules and priorities. 6 months later, I was in Geneva, Switzerland, presenting the crisis management protocol to the International Aviation Safety Council when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Cassandra, texting from a new Vietnamese phone number. "Alina, Derek told me he called you. I know you probably think I'm a terrible person now. Maybe I am. I've been in therapy here, and my counselor says I have abandonment issues that make me sabotage other people's success when I feel left out. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to get better." The message continued, "Also, I saw the article about your promotion in the International Aviation magazine. Mom sent me the link. I know I've never said this properly, but I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. You're saving lives with your work, and that's more important than anything I was dealing with at the airport that day." I read the message twice, then set my phone aside and returned to my presentation. Representatives from 43 countries were waiting to hear about protocols that would protect millions of air travelers worldwide. This was exactly where my attention belonged. Later that evening, I composed a brief response. "Cassandra, I'm glad you're getting help. I hope therapy gives you tools for managing anxiety without creating emergencies for other people. I'm proud of the work I'm doing, and I'm proud that I finally learned to prioritize it appropriately." I sent the message, then turned off my phone for the rest of the week. I was in Switzerland representing the United States at an international aviation safety conference, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to distract me from that responsibility. The crisis management protocol was unanimously approved for global implementation. Airlines across 6 continents began training their pilots in the coordination procedures we'd developed during Operation Skybridge. Emergency response agencies in dozens of countries started using communication protocols that could save thousands of lives during real disasters, and I was the lead consultant, overseeing the entire implementation process, traveling internationally to train pilots, brief emergency responders, and refine procedures based on real-world applications. For the first time in my adult life, my professional achievements belonged entirely to me. There were no family crises to manage, no manufactured emergencies to resolve, no guilt trips about choosing career advancement over sisterly obligations. There was just the work itself, meaningful, life-saving, internationally significant work that I could pursue with complete focus and absolute professional integrity. I learned something important during those months of international travel and professional recognition. Success feels completely different when you're not constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for someone to sabotage it or demand that you share credit or minimize your accomplishments to manage their insecurities. Success, it turns out, feels like finally being free to be exactly as competent, dedicated, and professionally ambitious as you've always known you could be. And that freedom, the freedom from manufactured family drama, from emotional manipulation disguised as love, from people who mistake your boundaries for betrayal, that freedom is worth protecting at any cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.